On your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors, is the 2024 draft class quite as bad as it's been made out to be? We answer that question and much more with Richard Stayman of Locked On NBA Big Board on today's show. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, April the 19th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Hell website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. The link is in the description of the podcast. And if you do that, you get to hang out with lovely people like yesterday's guest, Josh Green, the champion of the Locked On Raptors Fantasy League, who joined us on the show to talk about his fandom and his ideal Raptors off seasons. You can go listen to that show if you haven't yet, and join the Discord if you haven't yet. It's free to do. Would love to see you in there. Be part of our listener community where we definitely don't talk about the same thing every day. And it certainly is not something that we're going to talk about on today's show either. The whole keep or convey thing. No, that never comes up in the Discord. Not once. Of course, you can find the show for free wherever you get your podcast. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. It's always appreciated when you support the show, however you support the show. And you can find us on YouTube as well. Go subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and get a heads up every single time the show goes live or premieres via push notification. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed with a single bet, no matter what. Win or lose, it's $150. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And we will get started by bringing in today's guest as we're talking about, yes, the NBA draft. We're now about 3.5, 4-ish weeks away from the NBA draft lottery. And man, oh man, am I looking forward to that day so we can get a little bit of clarity on what the hell the Raptors are actually working with in this year's draft. But here to give a bit of a 10,000-foot view on the state of the draft class, some favorite targets for the Raptors later in the draft, it is Richard Stayman from the wonderful Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. Richard, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be here. And also, you tricked me. I thought you had Dallas Maverick, Josh Green on, and I was like, whoa. How did you get this crossover? Why the Raptors? I heard Josh Green, and I'm like, wait a minute. And then he said fantasy champion. And then I got some, is it too soon to make a Jonte Porter line?
No, it's never too soon.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was worried he was doing some shady stuff here now, and you scared me.
Yeah, no. It actually was Josh Green from the Mavericks. He's a big fan of the pod. Loves the Raps. Yeah, no. It was our pal Josh Green from across the pond who joined us yesterday. Maybe Dallas Mavericks wing Josh Green will join us in the future. But for now, we got Richard, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Richard, you know yourself some draft stuff. I often go to your breakdowns of players to get a good idea of sort of what to expect. You know, people who listen to this podcast know my whole character, I guess, that I've established on the show, because everyone becomes a caricature of themselves, is I'm the guy who hates all the children. I don't like draft picks. I think they stink. I think they're monopoly money, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, it's not that extreme. I understand the value of the draft. I also just understand the value of good actual basketball players as well, equally, if you will. Let's start big here. We'll get into some specifics. We'll talk about the Raptors' weird pick situation and some specific guys that you like as potential fits with the Raptors. But, we've all heard it at this point. The sort of consensus from the scouting community is that the 2024 class, not so great, between not a lot in terms of potential star talent at the top of the pool, a lot of questions and caveats, it seems, with a lot of the other guys of, oh, this guy does this thing really well, but also this thing horribly, or et cetera, et cetera. Is it a contrived narrative that the draft class is not that good? Obviously, we constantly hear that, well, every draft class produces good players. It's 2013 had Giannis and Rudy Gobert. Obviously that's true, but this class does seem to actually be a little bit less talented overall than most, correct?
Yeah, so it's tough because the top of the draft is rough. There's no franchise-changing talent. No matter how you look at it, even the best player probably ends up as a very good player, but we still don't even know his true all-star upside. The middle, I think, is where the draft really falls off, right? After 10 to 20, 25, there's no consensus. And there's
Mhm.
so much risk with almost every single player in that range that it gets tough. So maybe just we're looking at the wrong guys and some the right guys haven't risen yet, but there are some quality guys in the second round. Kind of like you said, this is cliche, but every draft does produce good players. It's extremely rare for that to not happen. Like it's happened once, maybe twice this century where a draft doesn't produce any stars. I think it's really only the 2000 draft.
Oh, that
And
2000 draft. What a banger that is.
and and like, you know what? We just saw a generational draft last year, and
Mhm.
having that one like truly once in a generation player since LeBron, I'd say in Wembanyama. Maybe it's also due for that once in a generation terrible draft class right after. So it
Sure.
is entirely possible. I do think the depth is going to be good. This is a draft that the best way I would put it is you're not going to draft the best player in the top 5. Like it's probably not going to happen. We're going to look at it in 10 years and go the same way Giannis went 13th or 15th, whatever it was. Rudy Gobert went 27th. Like that's the kind of outcome I think we're looking at here, where it's at an awkward spot for the best player to come from. That's what's probably going to happen.
Interesting stuff. I mean, the Raptors certainly in a position to potentially benefit from that. They have the Pacers pick, which is going to be something between 16 and 19, depending on a series of coin flips. They have the 31st overall pick via the Pistons from the OG Anunoby trade. And then, of course, they have their 6th overall pick, which we will get to later. I do want to ask you, like, it's interesting that everyone, like, if that's the sort of belief going in, none of these guys are going to be the best player from the draft. The logic of, well, just don't take any of the top 5 or 6 guys. Take someone who's projected for 15th seems to ring true to me, an idiot. But so among the sort of group of the top guys, right, you got Ron Holland, you got Matas Buzelis, the 2 G League Ignite guys who, I think it's fair to say the G League situation probably didn't help their stock at all this year, considering the Ignite now no longer exists. There's Alex Sarr, the big man playing, I believe, with Perth in Australia. All sorts of Zachary Richard, who seems to have fallen on hard times in his lead up to the draft as well. Is there a guy in that group that you do feel really good about? Is there someone who you'd kind of declare your favorite, who anyone picking in the top 6 or 7 should really hope lands on their team?
Yeah, there's only one player where I think if we say, okay, no matter the fit, he's going to be a good player and has the upside to get to a perennial all-star, there's only one player that fits that. Like surefire good player plus that upside, and that's Alex Sarr. He's my number one player, and I think this year every single top 5 team should be, if like whoever is that number 1 pick, it's not really a year they can be picky. I don't think, like I've seen Detroit, right? I think they had the worst record, and they are the team that, like, okay, yeah, they had Jalen Duren, and I know, sorry, this is not a Pistons podcast, but it's just to exemplify it, right? They drafted somebody 2 years ago that they thought would be the center of the future. They probably still take Sarr. So, like, to paint a picture of how good he is and why teams value him, I think that says a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, I know like a lot of Raptors fans are thinking, man, like Sarr would be really nice, and frankly, he seems, from what you read about the guy, like someone who could offer the Raptors like some defensive versatility with their bigs, right?
Yep.
Like they're pretty, Jakob Poeltl's a traditional drop guy. He can come out to the perimeter once in a while and hang. He's got good footwork, but he's a drop guy, and they kind of need him back there with the scheme they run. Kelly Olynyk, for all he does on offense, not much of a defender at all. So if you had an Alex Sarr who you could play in lineups with Olynyk, who could fill in for Poeltl in lineups where, maybe they want some more switchability, maybe that's an interesting thing. I'm of the mind here, Richard, that, if the Raptors jump up in the draft, great. If you can get Alex Sarr on the team, even a guy, I mean, you read the stuff lately, like Risa seemed really exciting to me, and maybe not so much of late. But if they can get an Alex Sarr, like, okay, you're happy with that, you move forward, and you just deal with having the pick conveyed to the Spurs next year. But because of the quality or lack thereof in the top ranges of this draft, I'm very much on the side of, I think the Raptors should be looking to convey their draft pick this season. Just get it out of the way. You still have the Pacers and Pistons picks. And I want to pick this up and get your thoughts on what the Raptors should be doing or should be hoping for. They can't do anything now. That's all in the lottery gods' fates. But, we'll get into your thoughts on what the prime ideal outcome for the Raptors is with their potential 6th overall pick. We'll get to that coming up in just one second. Today's show is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. Let's get to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising costs of inflation, to pay off your debts or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for a little bit of extra guidance as you're getting started, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. This is not a thing I ever really thought about in my day-to-day before, but now I own a house and I'm constantly thinking about this type of thing. Yahoo Finance is going to be in the rotation for me going forward. With a community of over 90 million users each month, the real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. You can securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. That's the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, the #1 sportsbook in North America. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. You got the baseball season in full swing as well, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed with just a single bet. Doesn't matter whether you win or you lose, you're getting that $150 in bonus bets into your account, so you can go and dabble in whatever you want. Maybe you want to, take some props or overs and unders in the NBA playoffs. Maybe you want to pick an NHL team to go all the way and win the Stanley Cup. Teams from the 7th and 8th seeds do it all the time in the NHL. Maybe you can go get some good odds on your New York Islanders or your Nashville Predators or some team like that. Of course, baseball's in full swing as well. Maybe you're going to a Jays game. You want a little live game, same game parlay while you're in the building. It's all there for you at FanDuel. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back at it here with Richard Stayman of Locked On NBA Big Board as we, continue the ongoing dialogue, the great debate of our time. Should the Toronto Raptors want their pick to convey to the Spurs this year as part of the Jakob Poeltl trade, or should they want it to stick in the top 6 and convey it at a later date? People who listen to this podcast every day know I am team convey. I think the sort of short-term sting of not getting a high-end pick on the heels of a disastrous season is a small price to pay for long-term clarity and unencumbered draft picks and just sort of a clean slate moving forward. Richard, we've talked about the top part of the draft here. The Raptors have a 46% chance of keeping the #6 pick. They have a 37% chance of jumping up as well in the lottery. And so that's kind of where the things sit right now. It's all coin flips, and we'll see how everything falls on lottery night. But if you're the Raptors, based on what you know about the top end of this draft, the players who are there, who could be there at 6 for the Raptors, if they do keep that pick, and also with the sort of presumed extreme strength of next year's draft as well, where are you at as far as should Raptors fans be hoping for the pick to convey or to have them keep it going into this summer's draft?
Yeah. So first of all, do you think the Raptors will be bad again, as in not even play-in, or do you think their expectation is the play-in?
I think next year the play-in's the expectation. If injuries hit, they'll have the shoot to pull if they want, I suppose. But I think they want to go into next season playing good ball. I think better than the Bulls has been my my rallying cry. Just be better than the Bulls. Doesn't seem all that hard to do. Between 7th and 10th, I think is kind of where I project them to finish right now, depending on what they do this offseason, obviously.
Yeah, I'd say unless you get #1. This is how I've told, I've gone on other team podcasts and said the exact same thing, right? This is a draft where, the Mavs had this same problem. I've seen this for multiple years. The Mavs have kind of just lived on that line. They finally ended the Porzingis trade this year, and they did the opposite of it. They're like, we want this pick now instead of the pick next year. That was part of why they tanked at the end of last year.
Sure.
And I think that says a lot. So I would say let that convey it. Unless you get #1, it's okay. Alex Sarr is the only person in this top 5 that really, if you were to compare him to next year's class, that you could say, okay, there's a real chance where he is better than even the 4th pick next year.
Sure.
If you're not, that bad. So I think I would rather, if it were me, I'd rather let San Antonio have it. get like the 10th, 12th pick somewhere next year, it's really not that going to be that different from the 5th pick this year or the 6th pick if they stayed the same, right? So I'm very much in favor. Just convey the pick. And also it opens up trade elements too. Like you're handicapping yourself, which is the biggest thing. Like the Raptors aren't necessarily handicapped by any means, but it is something to limit what you can trade to get better.
For sure. And I know there's this sort of sentiment of, oh, the Raptors are rebuilding. Rebuilding teams don't trade their future picks. But the Raptors are not a traditional rebuilding team. This is why all season long I have classified it as a recentering and not a rebuild. Like, it's semantics, obviously, and people can have their own opinion on it, but like, they have Scotty Barnes. He's the type of guy that most teams try to do a rebuild to acquire via the draft. They have Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett, and I continue to say the OG Anunoby trade absolutely changed the entire game for this Raptors retool, recenter, whatever you're calling it. If not for that trade, if OG gets traded for picks and is walks for nothing in the summer, then you're looking at probably a full-scale teardown. But Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett are the types of young, established players that you hope draft picks can one day become. And they are good. They are very good in the case of, I think, Emmanuel Quickley. I am super high on what he's going to be able to do next season. Already thinking about putting some money down on him winning most improved player. I think the opportunity is going to be there for him. And he looked really impressive in his lead guard duties down the stretch of the season. And so, like, this is not your standard cupboard is bare, bereft of talent, bereft of anything in terms of draft capital or anything like that team. Yeah, they have the pick going out to the Spurs. They also have 2 picks coming in from the Pacers. They have the Pistons pick. And so I don't think it's like a death knell if they convey the pick this year. And yeah, you don't add that, high-end talent, quote unquote, but you still have the Pacers and Pistons picks to add players to the team in a range of the draft that you say is probably where the better players are going to come from long-term anyway. It just feels kind of open and shut to me that it's better for the long-term health of the franchise, even with the short-term sting of not getting a nice new shiny toy out of this season. I just kind of think that's where it falls. And even if the Raptors next year, say, Richard, are like a playoff team, they don't end up in the lottery. Let's say they lose in the first round as a 7 or 8 seed or whatever. They pick 15th, 16th, 17th. I'm curious. I pitched this question to you in a DM about a month ago. I'm curious where you're at now. Would you rather pick 6th overall in this year's draft or 15th next year's draft? You mentioned top 10, but like, how far down does it go before it starts to become kind of a wash?
15 is pushing it.
Okay.
It's still in discussion. And I think that alone says a lot about the contrast of the 2 drafts, right? I'd say probably after 10, I might take 6, but it's still a point where you could say, well, like, there's going to be generally in the 10 to 15 range. That's where the older players, and I mean by older, maybe a junior at the oldest, is going. It's not going to be a freshman, so it's somebody who can help impact the game, like impact the team a little bit better. And that's kind of what Toronto needs. I think more than, like, yes, they need that centerpiece, but if they were going to get the 15th pick next year, it's a really good outcome. The same way 17 and 31 this year, like, is kind of a hot take, and I'm not meaning it to be like a takey thing, but I would rather have 17 and 31 probably than 6. If you don't feel confident, like if your top 3 are the top 3 picks, and then there's a massive drop off, like, keep that. But to answer the question, like, 15 is 100% in that discussion, and that says so much about both draft classes.
Yeah, it's again, I know that every draft class produces good talent, and we don't know these things. It's all very unknowable. It's all amorphous. Donovan Clingan could turn out to be a fantastic, centerpiece big man going forward. But based on what we know right now, it doesn't seem like this draft is going to produce those guys, especially up at the top, who really tangibly change your life. And I do think, not sweating out having to, like, oh, we're going to convey, do we got to tank to this spot in the standings? Have we tanked too late? Like, there's just such a value to not having to worry about that again. This season was miserable largely because of that sort of fretting over will they keep it or will they not. And we're still talking about this damn thing now. I'm so excited for the lottery, man, to just never think about this again. And if we're thinking about it again next year, I'm going to be a very sad boy on the podcast all season long. Just prepare yourselves for it. And I think too, like, you can kind of have it both ways next season if you convey the pick, right? Where you go in hoping for the best, but and you don't have to sort of pull the chute in January to be as bad as the Portlands and the Detroits and the Washingtons of the world. You can play it out, and hey, you get to March and it's not looking like you're going to be there. Okay, like we can softly find ourselves in the 6, 7, 8 range of the draft lottery, like they did in the Tampa season, for example. Obviously, if you keep the pick, you are basically required, if things aren't going well early on, to tank as hard as you can to get into the top 6 to guarantee you keep your pick. And at that point, like, are you really wasting another half season tanking away, hoping for lottery luck? Like, it just feels like you kind of get into this cycle that you never escape from, Richard. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, that's the danger of draft scouting, right? Like, especially when you're doing it from a team element, it can drive you absolutely nuts with just the horrible outcomes, but also the high end outcomes, and really gets your hopes up. That's the absolute danger. Like, there's a reason I started as Mavs draft, is I did exactly that, and now I think I've separated that stuff where I can do NBA stuff and then like college stuff and high school, whatever. But that those years where I was really tied for the team to draft, like that drove me nuts.
Yeah, man. There's a reason I'm a draft skeptic. And look, it's clearly trauma from Andrea Bargnani's and Rafael Araujo's of past years. I get it. We all have childhood trauma that informs our adult decision making. But it is what it is. I can't do anything about it. I'm not going to go to therapy and talk about basketball trauma. That feels like a bad use of therapy. We'll come back on the other side, Richard. And I want to get into some of your favorite guys for the Raptors, potentially around 6 if they're there. But I'm thinking I'm more interested even in the later spots at the Pacers pick or the Pistons pick. We're going to get into that coming up in just 1 second to close out the show. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. It is the single best place to go and hire for your small business. You want to find quality professionals, right? Well, LinkedIn Jobs is the way to do it. They have the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. It's a really hard thing being a talent, a hiring manager, whatever it is. It takes a lot of time. You got to wear a lot of hats when you're running a small business. Let LinkedIn wear the hiring hat for you. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, rounding it out here with Richard Stayman of Locked On NBA Big Board, a fantastic podcast that if you're not listening to or watching on YouTube, you should be doing from here to the draft, because no one does it better. And obviously at Mavs Draft for all of Richard's wonderful draft opinions and thoughts as well. Rich, let's get into some guys for the Raptors. The Pacers pick, again, we don't know exactly where it's going to be, 16 through 19, anywhere in there. The Pistons pick we know is going to be the 31st overall pick because the Pistons stunk. Where are you at? Let's just rattle off some names rapid fire. Who's a name in that 16 to 19 range? It comes to mind, you're like, ooh, that guy's a Raptors guy. The Raptors kind of need wings, more wings, defense, wings, some more wings. I think it's like kind of on the menu. My favorite kind of menu, loaded with wings. The backup point guard spot could be a thing they address. A big, like a switch big we talked about, all kinds of different potential fits. Who you got as a name that you might want to throw out there as a potential for the Raptors there?
Well, yeah, that wing line, that got me. Part of what you said, I was too focused on that. But no, the wings and more wings. I also think, like, correct me if I'm wrong, this might be a little bit outdated notes. I know I wrote it in January, but also I do feel Toronto could benefit maybe from just one more point guard, even if it's a long-term guy. So I haven't ruled that out.
Ujiri mentioned like potentially finding like a backup point guard.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
So that was who I was going to lead with, was actually a guard. And the reason he's the only guard I'll mention for 17, sorry. And that's Isaiah Collier. He was the number 1 recruit in high school. He's fallen a lot. I think a lot of it had to do with he played for a awfully managed USC team. They were the only team that really ran a 3-guard lineup in the Pac-12, and it was brutal. They had Boogie Ellis, who's a senior, Isaiah Collier, and Bronny James. and it really just did not work, and it made everybody look worse. I think he could be a nice, like, his ceiling's probably Tyus Jones, not necessarily what it is right now, because I actually don't think that's the best version of him. I think it's really what he did in Memphis and on those winning teams, how he made everyone better. That's like a real outcome for him. But for a wing, there are two guys that I liked. I liked Tristan da Silva.
Yes.
And he's a European guy at heart. His brother was a prospect, German guy. And then Jacoby Walter at Baylor. And I think that is the most Raptors pick because he's from Dallas, seen him. His shot has grown a lot. Has some concerns about athleticism in that, like functional athleticism and defense, but man, he can shoot and shoot off the dribble.
Interesting on Walter. He's not quite popped for me, and I think it's because I am more sort of leaning towards the defense types, which, there's not a ton of who offer, there's like Ryan Dunn, for example, where like, is there ever going to be offense from him? Yeah, it's like, look, there's a lot of heartbroken people in the Locked On Raptors Discord right now watching you shake your head, thinking about Ryan Dunn's offense. It would be awesome if his offense were there, but it's just not, it seems. But yeah, I think Da Silva particularly has been someone who I've kind of had my eye on. I just like adults who know how to play basketball, and it really seems like he's an adult who knows how to play basketball. Do you have a little more on Da Silva as far as like how exactly he could slide it and fit? Obviously, Walter, the shooting never goes out of style. They might lose Gary Trent Jr. this summer. Maybe that's just like a clean like-for-like replacement with a younger player with some more upside. But Da Silva, to me, at 6'9", can kind of do a little bit of everything, maybe a jack of all trades, master of none type. But what's your sort of read on him, the overall scouting report on how he might fit in with the Raptors?
Yeah, I like his game a lot. He's a really good shooter. I think his role at Colorado has misplaced who he is. I think he's a shooting specialist first and everything else second. Like, that kind of changed this last year. They made him more of that, but still they made him an all-around forward, which it's good. It helps because if he can just scale his game down, he'll be very good. And not everyone can do it, but he's set up very well for that. And he has ball skills. He's able to attack closeouts. Like, also, one of the things I love this is probably doesn't actually mean anything, but he randomly makes like a crazy good pass. And I love that for shooters where they can read the floor on their like attacking closeouts. I think that's one of the most valuable things a shooter can do is keep their eyes up. They're not just seeing they don't have their eyes focused on the next pass. They haven't premeditated their play. Like, he truly adapts to what the defense gives him. But defensively, there's a little bit of concern, so he may not fit that part. But I think he knows what to do, and he has the size. He's not stiff. He's just not great. So if there was a team to like really hit that upside for him, it's Toronto. I think like it just screams that.
Yeah, I'm a big Da Silva guy. I think he's an older guy too. He's going to be 23 when he starts his NBA career, so there's that to consider. But I think with where the Raptors are at, and with this draft feeling like it maybe doesn't have those bankable upside bets to maybe make, a guy who just like figures to be a pretty good NBA player with that pick feels like kind of a perfect type of guy to target, honestly, because they just need guys who can run with Scotty, IQ, RJ right now. Those guys are ready to go and play ball, and I think guys who can support that are interesting targets. Let's go through a couple more guys. So going down to the 31 range, and maybe this guy doesn't last to 31, but you're a Miami University guy. I want to ask you about Kyshawn George, who feels like maybe one of the few like higher upside wing plays. Maybe not like super duper high end upside because he's not like a crazy jump out of the gym athlete or anything like that. But Kyshawn George, if you haven't seen him, 6'8" shooting guard from Miami. And the way I would describe his game is like if Kyle Anderson could shoot, like he's got that sort of slow off kilter rhythm, but he's got a pretty good sort of understanding of the floor. He's a nice passer and a damn good shooter as well. You might have the sort of hometown bias on this one, but give me the read on Kyshawn George. He's someone I've even thought like, is it worth reaching on him with that Pacers pick if he feels like the guy, if he feels like the wing upside play? Is it like too much of a stretch to say that, or where are you at on Kyshawn George?
No, I have him pretty safely as a first round pick. I think there's some concerns about like, okay, he was nice. He was also a 20-year-old freshman, but sure. I think there's a lot to take away that like a team like Toronto would really maximize. He plays hard all the time. The motor is there. The intangibles are there. He sees the game extremely well, like you said, and that applies to both ends. Like he just makes the right plays. He's a great shooter. I think that's going to be a selling point. I've talked to some scouts that have said, like, okay, we don't know how real that shot is. Like, he may have just gotten lucky.
Sure.
And I kind of
tiny sample, right? Like, yeah.
Because he didn't get to the line at all. Like, he was very much, he stayed along the perimeter and he took open shots at the rim. That was really his game. And I kind of wonder, is the 77% free throw percentage or 78, whatever it is that really misleading because it's such low volume and he doesn't get to the line? Is that a concern? And also, I just don't know what his defense looks like. I've seen flashes of amazing defense and flashes of horrible defense. I have no idea what to believe on that.
Right. Yeah, it feels like, to me, when I've watched him, it seems like he's got like the smarts for defense, and whether the like athleticism and burst helps him get there to be kind of elite is, I think he'll be a better defender at the NBA than, say, Grady Dick, but it's a similar idea of just like, oh, like he understands how basketball works and how team defense works and can kind of fit into a scheme pretty decently, if maybe not like a super high-end individual guy. But, there's certainly flashes when you look at the tape. There's some interesting stuff there. A couple other quick guys I want to run through. You mentioned we got to talk about Ryan Dunn. We mentioned him a little bit earlier. Like, defense on this team, it's a need, right? Their wing defense has been bad. RJ Barrett, for all of the wonderful stuff he's done on offense, defense seems to be the weak point for him. I think it's pretty established now that Scotty Barnes' best role as a defender is as a low man, sort of helping rim protector next to Jakob Poeltl on the back line. Emmanuel Quickley is a decent defender for his position, but not any great shakes. They need some wing defense. It would be awesome if OG Anunoby could just sprout from the ground and join the team again, but that's not how it works. Ryan Dunn is the best defensive prospect in this draft based on basically everything you read. He's a maniac. He also shot 20% from three and 53% from the line and doesn't really offer anything on offense. Is there any hope for him to become an offensive, just like a break-even offensive player in the NBA? Yesterday we were kicking around in the Locked On Raptors Discord the idea of Herb Jones and his kind of insane jump from college to the pros. I don't like saying, hey, look at that outlier development story. Maybe that's replicable, but is there anything there hope-wise that you can give for the Ryan Dunn heads out there? Because there are many. I want to be one, but the offense just does not feel like it's anywhere close.
Sure. So bear with me here. I'm going to go a little bit all over the place. So
yes.
One, Herb Jones, one of the hardest workers I've ever seen. Like, I talked to him at the combine and he gave me a lot of insight back in 2021 just about how he went from 7% to 35% and it wasn't a fluke. And I asked him outright, I'm like, how are you going to prove to teams this isn't a fluke? Like, what did you do? What are you showing them that your work ethic was like? And he walked me through it. And look, every NBA prospect has a strong work ethic. Like, regardless of what people tell you, have told you with Andrew Wiggins doesn't work hard or whoever you want to pinpoint, they still work very hard. Mm-hmm. But this guy blew everybody out of the water. His shooting, he knew what he had to do and he did everything in his power, 110% effort every single time to get there. So that is extreme outlier. I don't buy Ryan Dunn doing that. The other thing is Rafael Barlow, on the host of Locked On NBA Big Board, he's been very familiar with Ryan Dunn, and he's told us, when he was younger, he actually was a shooter. And then he grew, his arms got super long, and then if you played your arms, the arm length matters. There's a reason on 2K, for example, when you're building a My Player, if you add short wingspan or long wingspan, the shot changes. It really does impact your shot. But I see Ryan Dunn as a center. He's a center offensively at 6'8", 6'9", but 1 through 5 defensively.
Sure.
I don't know if that works. He's an absolute, nobody's going to guard him on the offensive end. And honestly, you can sag off him at the rim because he's 6'8", 6'9", and you can easily recover on that. Mm-hmm. So I worry about that. I don't think he does enough on offense to make up for it, despite outstanding defense. He's not better to me than Matisse Thybulle was coming out of college. And Matisse Thybulle still struggled, even on bad teams, to get minutes.
Yeah. Hey, it's a bummer. I really wanted to be there for Ryan Dunn because the defense feels kind of game-changing, but just don't know if the fit's there with the Raptors, with the picks they're at. Do you got time for a couple more guys? This is fun. I'm just throwing names and you're throwing me back. So I'm sorry if I'm just completely butchering this name. Ulrich Chomche, out of Cameroon, the NBA Africa Academy. How badly did I screw that up? Number one, because I've only ever read the name, I guess, and not heard it said aloud. But super duper young, impressed at the Nike Hoop Summit. But the sort of general thought is he's pretty raw, and it's surprising that he hasn't just committed to go to college for a year. That still could come. We'll see, I guess, but he did declare for the draft this past week. Feels Raptors-y in that, we know that Masai Ujiri has a finger on the pulse of talent in Africa. And, we know that in the past, they've taken serious swings on sort of toolsy players. Where are you at with Chomche?
Yeah, so I'm not a huge... And not like I don't have a strong opinion one way or another because his tape is mostly hidden, and we've seen him in Nike Hoop Summit like last week. That's
nothing
really
like grainy footage, man. I love grainy footage.
it's tough to find anything on him. So he's with Clutch now, and a lot of people think because he declared that he might have gotten a guarantee. Toronto does fit that. Like a top 20 guarantee usually is what'll do it.
Sure,
I could totally see it. He really impressed with passing. Like he can pass for his size. It is really impressive, but he is extremely raw. Like he is not somebody that like I'm not going to say the line, but he's not contributing for a few years. I'll just leave it at that. As much as he's not Bruno Caboclo.
Say it.
No, but he's a long-term prospect. Like he is not helping anything for the first 2 years.
Yeah, that's I mean, hey. We know it's 2 years away from 2 years away. Damn it. Just say it. We don't have to avoid it. It's not Voldemort. We can say it. That's fine though. Sometimes you gotta, you get those sort of dudes in the door and hope that they can become something. That's why they have the G League, right? It didn't work with Bruno, but they've had success with other guys. Not of maybe that level of rawness, but it's interesting. A guy I just can't stop thinking about because I don't know if I've ever had more fun watching a player play in the NCAA tournament. Tyon Grant-Foster, whole other end of the spectrum, 24 years old, missed 2 full years after having a cardiac arrest playing for, was it DePaul? That dude rocks. I don't know how the hell else to say it. He's insanely athletic. If you have not seen Tyon Grant-Foster tape, go watch it. An absolute world ender on defense when he's not sort of misjudging rotations and overdoing it. Offensively, just like a bucketsman. I'm not sure. We'll see how the 3-point shot comes. Kind of honestly, felt a little like RJ Barrett at times watching him just kind of, steamroll around screens and towards the rim. I just got visions of running RJ Barrett stuff with him. I can't stop thinking about this guy. He's 24 years old. I know it sounds insane, but 31st overall pick. Is that a ridiculous reach to go for Tyon Grant-Foster at 24, considering his story to this point?
Yeah, first of all, not your average 24-year-old. You got to look at him entirely different from every other 24-year-old. In terms of experience, he's still 21, right? So, with him, 31 is probably a little bit of a reach. I think though, you could probably trade 31's an extremely desirable pick. You could easily trade down 10 spots and get him and pick up future assets.
Gotcha.
At the same time, though, second round picks, once it hits 31, you're on your own board. You like a guy, go grab him. But my concern with Tyon Grant-Foster is I just don't know how much he can actually shoot.
Right.
That's really my whole deck. Everything else is really impressive. I think he has a lot of defensive flashes, some true 3-level scoring upside if he gets that 3-point shot. He's
just so fun. He's just one of the most fun college players I've ever seen. And I want the fun, cool guy on the basketball team I like. But we'll leave it there, Richard. I'm sure I'll rope you into coming back on the podcast again to throw just a bunch of random names at you once again before the draft comes. But really appreciate your time today, man. Lots of amazing insight. Where can people check out all your amazing work?
Yeah, Locked On NBA Big Board. Shout out to the Locked On crew. If you're listening for another one, Locked On NBA Big Board, 5 days a week, NBA Draft. And then I started the Substack recently, mapdraft.substack.com.
Awesome. Everyone go check out all of Richard's amazing draft work leading into the draft. An absolute essential read, and listen. We will leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for supporting the show and rocking with us. It's very much appreciated when you support the show. However you support the show, follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, find us on YouTube, all that jazz. We will be back again on Monday as we continue our look at the good, the bad, and the from this Raptors season with a look at the bad with Vivek Jacob. Yeah, that's to look forward to on Monday. And we will have a loaded week once again as we get ready for the draft and all that good stuff headed over the next set of days, weeks, months, etc. With that, have a wonderful weekend. I usually take a shot on the rim behind my my head here before the show ends, but I lost my ball, so I don't have it today. I'll shoot on Monday for the people who really just wait with bated breath for me to miss this shot every single time. But either way, thanks so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.